All right, so we're ready to begin our project, and I wanted to explain or walk through an example of an asset shot workflow. Right. So the first thing is in project we're gonna have characters, props, vehicles, environments, and libraries. These are all types of assets, and this is kind of important because the big masses are assets, and then of course we have shots, and then shots have a bunch of other things inside. But let's focus first on props and environments for the example. And to begin with, let's just take a look at a prop. And this prop is going to be a chair. Okay, so what happens with that chair, which is an asset, is that is going to have to, we're going to need some reference, then we're going to need to sculpt it, texture it, and then do some shading, right? So to begin with, let's focus just on the modeling task. And within that modeling task, what we have is a list of requirements, and those can be stuff like the reference, the instructions, and the due date for that task, right? And then what's going to happen is that that task is going to get assigned to an artist, hopefully a happy artist. And that artist is going to start to produce versions, okay? Then those versions are going to go through revisions, and then we're going to end up in a place where we have deliverables for the next department. For example, rigging and shading. If we take a look back, modeling is in between reference and texturing, right? So what happens is that it receives stuff from reference and it delivers stuff to texturing. Now, props go inside of environments. And what that means is that if we have something like an environment called kitchen, and this is going to be an env for environment, then we can start to populate a kitchen with props just like the chair. And in this case, we have A that represents our chair, and then we have C and B that represents two other assets that have gone through the modeling and maybe shading and other parts. What that means is that inside of kitchen, which is all the stuff that we have in green, there's a chair that's imported, and maybe that is on version 1. And then we have a table and a fridge, and those can be on its own different versions. And it's worth noting that we can import either the modeling task, or maybe there's another task that we want to import, for example, the rig. Maybe for the fridge, we're importing the rig since that's going to move. Now, the distinction that I want to make here is that the stuff in green is in the file of the environment called kitchen, right? So if we want to take a look at this, maybe kitchen is a file that's called env kitchen modeling, right? And what that means is that you're modeling stuff that's going to be maybe exclusively on the kitchen. And then you're importing assets like C, A, and B, the table, the fridge, and the chair that are going to populate that. Those may only be on environment, or they may be on some other places. The important thing is there is a difference between objects that are only in the environment file and those other files that are getting imported. What is the difference? Well, very simple. And the other thing is that kitchen can also go through versions, and we might have version 1 with this arrangement, and then version 2 with this very different arrangement of the same props. Now, what is the difference? Well, the difference is that I'll go back to the difference of having the files imported and then the other objects. The thing I want to show is, well, that the same way that our chair had an output, kitchen also has an output, and in this case is a JSON file and some geometries and the render. So the difference is the geometry that's in green, basically all the stuff that we've drawn here in green, is something that we output to the geometries. So really what we're saying is that when we output this, that all this stuff, the geometry, we're only gonna export the stuff that's in green, right, into those files. And then the props, the other ones that we're getting, the A, the B, and the C, those are all gonna be exported of this file via the JSON file. All right. The other thing that we may get as an output from this file is the renders, and those can be MOVs, PNG, and EXRs. Now, here, what we're saying is, listen, there's a source file, and then I have things that are gonna come out of that source file. So this would be our source, and all of this is stuff that belongs to our renderer. Okay, and these are all outputs from that source file. And as I mentioned, geometries, JSON files, MOV, anything that comes from Kishen version 2. All right. Now, coming back to the JSON file, what that is just a document that has the object name for each of the objects in that scene, the location, and the source file, and that source file obviously has the version and all the other stuff, right? And then the geometry is what was sculpted inside of the environment. Now, shots. Let's assume that we have shot 10, and this is a shot of the task layout. If we come in here and press our magic build button, what's going to happen is that it is going to import into that scene all the stuff that we had on our kitchen. Because previously we've specified that, well, shot 10 takes place in the kitchen, right? And what that's going to do is that it's going to go through our JSON file, and it's going to first import the environment here, right? And then it's going to figure out each of these props, and it's going to bring that in. Now, after that, we can obviously place our cameras, and the output is going to be a JSON file and a camera, okay? And what that means is that for the next process in place, we are only using the new location. Maybe we move one of these objects after going through the environments, and the camera, and this can be handled per shot, and each shot is going to have its own JSON file, it's going to have its own layout file, and then its animation and the other processes. So that is the main workflow of these things, and the cool thing is that later we can get into non-linear editing of all of these. So for example, in here I have a floating object, and this can be anything. Let's say that we had, I don't know, a bowl inside of the kitchen. If we wanted to export that as a new asset, what we can do is just tell it to, let's send that out into a new asset, and that's going to be called bowl, and we'll get version 001, and then that becomes its own asset that can be edited, and we can add a lot of versions. So the cool thing is that you can sculpt this file, the environment, and then we can split specific objects that we might want for something else. So yeah, that is the typical character workflow for this.